In 480 BC, on a narrow strip of land between a mountain and a sea, something impossible happened. 300 men stood against an army of over 100,000. They knew they would die. They knew it from the very first day. And they stayed anyway. Today, you are not just going to learn about a battle. You are going to learn about a code, a way of living that turned ordinary men into legends. You will improve your English while discovering what it truly means to stand for something, even when standing costs everything. So sit back, listen carefully, and let me take you to a place called Thermopylae. Let me paint a scene for you. By the third day, the Persian dead piled so high in the narrow pass that the Spartan spears could not reach the next wave of attackers. The ground was slick with blood and seawater, and from his golden throne on a nearby hill, King Xerxes of Persia smiled. Because the traitor was already on his way, a Greek man named Phalanx, his name in Greek means nightmare, was walking through the dark mountain paths. He was guiding 10,000 of Xerxes' best soldiers, the immortals, toward the rear of the Greek army. By dawn, the Spartans would be surrounded. This is the story of how 300 men changed history. Not by winning a battle, but by showing the world what it means to never give up. Let us go back to the beginning. Sparta was not like other Greek cities. In Athens, people valued art, philosophy, and democracy. In Thebes, they valued music and poetry. In Corinth, they valued trade and business. In Sparta, people valued one thing above all else: strength. From the moment a Spartan boy was born, his life was not his own. A group of city elders examined him carefully. If he was weak, sick, or deformed, if his body was not perfect, he was left on a mountainside to die. The Greeks called this exposure. It was not considered cruel. It was considered practical. Sparta could not afford weak citizens. If the boy was healthy, he was allowed to live. But his life would be hard. At the age of 7, he was taken from home forever. He entered the Agoge, the upbringing, a brutal military school. Boys slept on beds made of reeds, hard, prickly plants that grow near water. They were given one cloak per year, beaten for mistakes, and trained to endure pain without crying. They learned to fight in a phalanx, a formation where soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder, shields overlapping, long spears pointing forward. The phalanx was like a wall of bronze and wood and iron. One story shows their discipline perfectly. A Spartan boy stole a live fox cub and hid it under his cloak. Rather than confess, he let the animal bite into his stomach. He died in silence. That was the Spartan way. Endure anything rather than show weakness. This training continued until age 30. Only then could a Spartan marry. Even then, he remained a soldier until 60. Let me introduce you to the man who would lead them. Leonidas was not born to be king. He was the third son of King Anaxandridas II. In most royal families, a third son would live a life of luxury. Not in Sparta. Leonidas went through the Agoge like every other boy. He learned to fight, to endure pain, to obey orders. He earned the right to be called a homoios, an equal, a full citizen. Then his oldest brother died. Then his second brother died. Leonidas became king around 490 BC. He was in his late 30s. He married Gorgo, the daughter of the previous king. She was a woman unlike any other. When Persian ambassadors came to Sparta demanding earth and water as a symbol of submission, the Spartans threw them into a well. They shouted, "Find your earth and water down there." Gorgo herself was famous for her sharp wisdom. When asked why Spartan women seemed to hold such power, she replied simply, "Because we are the only women who give birth to real men." By the time Leonidas became king, the enemy was already coming from the east. The Persian Empire was the largest the world had ever seen. It stretched from modern India to Egypt. It was ruled by one man, the King of Kings. His name was Xerxes. Say it with me, Xerxes. A man who believed he could control even the sea. 10 years earlier, in 490 BC, the Persians tried to invade Greece. They were defeated at Marathon by the Athenians. Before the battle, a runner named Philoctetes ran nearly 240 kilometers from Athens to Sparta to ask for help. He ran there and back in 2 days. After the Greek victory at Marathon, another runner carried the news back to Athens, a distance of about 42 kilometers. That legendary run is where our modern marathon comes from. That defeat wounded Persian pride deeply. King Darius planned revenge, but he died. His son Xerxes took the throne. Xerxes did not accept failure. He spent 4 years gathering the largest army of the ancient world. Modern estimates say between 100,000 and 300,000 soldiers. He brought soldiers from everywhere: Persians in scale armor, Medes from the mountains, Assyrians with bronze helmets, Egyptian archers, Indian cavalrymen. Herodotus lists 47 distinct ethnic groups. Xerxes built a bridge of boats across the Hellespont, a narrow strip of water between Asia and Europe, about 1.5 kilometers wide. A storm destroyed it. Xerxes was so angry he ordered his men to whip the sea with chains. He shouted, "You bitter water! Your master punishes you for attacking him without reason." This shows his character. He believed he could control everything. This was the man coming to destroy Greece. The Greeks knew they could not defeat him in open battle. They had fewer than 10,000 soldiers, but they had Thermopylae. Thermopylae means hot gates in Greek, named for the hot sulfur springs that still flow today. But the name is not important. What matters is the geography. Thermopylae was a narrow pass along the coast of central Greece. On one side was Mount Kallidromos, steep and rocky. On the other side was the sea. In some places, the pass was only 15 meters wide, about the length of a large bus. In ancient times, the sea came right up to the mountain. There was no way around. This was the perfect place for a small army to stop a large one. Now, let me explain how the battle began. In summer 480 BC, Xerxes marched south. His army was so large that, according to Herodotus, it took 7 days and 7 nights for all soldiers to cross a single bridge. They drank entire rivers dry. When the Persians arrived at Thermopylae, they saw something strange. The Greeks were not panicking. Some Spartan soldiers were exercising. Others were combing their long hair. This was a Spartan tradition. Before a battle, they combed their hair as a sign that they were ready to die with honor. Xerxes watched from his throne on a hill. He thought the Greeks must be mad. He sent a messenger to the Greek camp. The messenger said, "Our arrows will block out the sun. You cannot fight us. Lay down your weapons." A Spartan general named Leonidas replied, "Then we will fight in the shade." This is a real historical quote, recorded by Herodotus. It tells you everything about the Spartan mindset. They were not afraid. Xerxes waited 4 days. He expected the Greeks to run. They did not. On the 5th day, he ordered his soldiers to attack. The first wave was made of Medes and Scythians, soldiers from the eastern parts of the empire. They were good fighters, but they were not prepared for what they found. The Greeks stood in their phalanx. The front line was made of Spartan hoplites, heavy infantry with bronze helmets, bronze breastplates, large round shields called aspis, and long spears called dori, about 2.5 meters long. Behind them came soldiers from other Greek cities, Thespians, Thebans, Corinthians, all standing together. The Persian soldiers carried light wicker shields, made from woven plant material, like baskets, and shorter spears. Their armor was cloth or leather. They could not break through the Greek wall. The Persian soldiers fell in waves, their bodies piled up in the narrow pass. The Greeks pushed them back into the sea. Some Persians drowned, pushed off the edge by their own men. Xerxes watched from his throne. He was furious. He jumped up 3 times in anger, the historians say. He sent his best soldiers next, the immortals. The immortals were the elite of the Persian army, 10,000 hand-picked soldiers. Their name came from the fact that their number never changed. When one died, another immediately took his place. They wore gold jewelry on their uniforms and carried short spears and bows. They were the best, and they failed. The narrow pass worked against them. They could not use their numbers. They could only attack from the front, one by one, and each time they were met by Spartan spears. The Greeks also used a feigned retreat tactic. They pretended to run away, and when the Persians chased them, the Spartans turned and killed them. By the end of the 2nd day, thousands of Persian soldiers lay dead. The Greeks had lost almost no one. Xerxes was furious. He had brought the largest army in history, and he was being stopped by 300 men in a narrow hallway. He needed a different strategy, and then a traitor gave him one. His name was Ephialtes. Say it, Ephialtes. He was a local Greek from near Thermopylae. He knew the mountains well. He knew something the Greeks hoped the Persians would never discover. There was a secret path through the mountains, the Anapeia Pass. It was a narrow, rocky trail that went up the mountain and came down behind the Greek position. If the Persians used this path, they could surround the Greeks and attack from both sides. There would be no escape. Ephialtes went to Xerxes and offered to show him the path for money. Greed. That was all. He betrayed his own country for gold. His name, Ephialtes, became a Greek word meaning nightmare. To this day, calling someone an Ephialtes means calling them a traitor. It is the most hated name in the language. That night, Xerxes sent the immortals up the mountain path, guided by Ephialtes. There was a full moon, so the path was visible. They climbed for hours. By dawn, they were behind the Greek lines. Leonidas learned about the betrayal early in the morning. Greek scouts, parapoloi, a sort of mountain guard, had seen the Persians moving through the mountains at night. They ran back to warn the king. Leonidas called a council. The situation was clear: stay and be surrounded, or retreat and live to fight another day. Most of the Greek commanders chose to retreat. Leonidas made a different decision. He told the other Greek soldiers to leave and prepare for the next battle. Then, he did something extraordinary. He sent most of his own soldiers away too. Only 300 Spartans remained, and 700 Thespians, soldiers from Thespia who refused to leave. Their commander, Demophilus, said, "If Thespia falls, there is no Greece. We will stay with the Spartans." And 400 Thebans, who were kept as hostages because the other Greeks did not trust them, and about 900 Helots, people owned by the Spartan state who worked the land while Spartan men trained for war. They fought as light infantry. In total, about 2,000 men stayed to die. Why did Leonidas stay? Before the war, he had visited the oracle at Delphi, a sacred place where a priestess spoke prophecies from the god Apollo. The oracle told him, "For you Spartans, either your great city will be sacked by Persian men, or the whole land shall mourn the death of a king of the royal line." In other words, either Sparta falls, or its king dies. Leonidas knew he was going to die. He chose to die so Sparta could live. But there was another reason. Leonidas understood that this battle was not about winning. It was about sending a message. If the Spartans ran away, the other Greek cities would lose hope. They would surrender. Greece would become part of the Persian Empire. Xerxes would burn their temples and rule them with cruelty. But if the Spartans stayed and died, if they showed the world what it meant to fight for freedom, the other Greeks would be inspired. They would keep fighting, and eventually they would win. Leonidas was not fighting for himself. He was fighting for the idea of Greece. The final day began. The Persians came from both sides, from the front and from the rear. The Greeks formed their phalanx one last time. The Greeks marched forward into the wider part of the pass, where they could fight in open space. They fought with their long spears until the spears broke. Then they fought with short swords. When the swords broke, they fought with their hands, their teeth, and even their bare fists. Leonidas fought in the front line. He was the first to fall, struck by an arrow or a spear. The Persians tried to take his body as a trophy, but the Spartans fought desperately to protect their king. 4 times they pushed the Persians back. Finally, they carried his body to a small hill in the center of the pass. In the end, they were surrounded. The Persian archers fired arrows until the sun was blocked out. Herodotus writes that the Spartans died with their weapons in their hands, fighting until the very last breath. Every Spartan who stayed at Thermopylae died that day. Every single one. Thespians died too. All 700 of them. Thebans surrendered and were branded like cattle. The battle was over, but the story was just beginning. When the Persians left, the Greeks returned to the battlefield. They buried their dead on a small hill and placed a stone monument on top. The poet Simonides wrote these words, "Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie." Let me say that again, slowly. Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie. These words are among the most famous in history. They carry the entire meaning of Thermopylae. The Spartans did not die because they were forced to. They died because they chose to. They were obedient to their code, which said, never retreat, never surrender, never abandon your post. They died for that code. And in dying, they created something that could never be killed. Here's what most people do not know. The Battle of Thermopylae was a military defeat. The Persians won. They marched into central Greece and burned Athens to the ground. But the battle was a strategic victory. The 3 days the Spartans fought gave the Greek navy time to prepare. Under Themistocles, Themistocles, the Greek fleet gathered in the narrow straits of Salamis. A few weeks after Thermopylae, they defeated the Persian navy. The narrow waters worked in their favor, just like the narrow pass had worked for Leonidas. 1 year later, in 479 BC, The full Greek army, led by the Spartan general Pausanias, defeated the Persians at Plataea. The Persians left Greece forever. Greece was free. And it all started with 300 men who refused to give up. Now, let me ask you again. Have you ever faced impossible odds? Have you ever felt like giving up was the only choice? Here's what the Spartans teach us. Lesson 1. Your life is defined by your choices, not your circumstances. Leonidas did not choose to be born in Sparta or to face an empire of 100,000 soldiers. But he chose how to respond. When the oracle gave him two terrible options, lose your city or lose your life, he chose to lose his life so his city could win. That choice defined him forever. Lesson 2. The size of your enemy does not determine the size of your courage. 300 against 100,000 is not a fair fight. But the Spartans did not ask for a fair fight. They asked for a fight that mattered. Courage is not about winning. It is about standing up when you know you might lose. Lesson 3. Sacrifice is not about losing. It is about giving. The Spartans did not lose their lives. They gave their lives. There is a difference. When you lose something, it is taken from you. When you give something, you choose to offer it. And that choice gives your life meaning. Leonidas gave his life for Sparta. He was not a victim. He was a volunteer. Lesson 4. Betrayal can destroy a plan, but it cannot destroy a purpose. Ephialtes betrayed the Greeks. He showed the Persians the secret path. He destroyed the military plan, but he could not destroy what the Spartans stood for. Their purpose, to inspire the rest of Greece, lived on. His name became a curse. Their names became eternal. Lesson 5. Your legacy is what you inspire others to achieve. Leonidas did not live to see Greece free. He died on the battlefield. But his sacrifice inspired an entire civilization to fight for freedom. The Athenians at Salamis, the Greeks at Plataea, all of them were inspired by what happened at Thermopylae. 2,500 years later, we are still telling his story. That is legacy. So I want you to think about your own life. What are you fighting for? What would you be willing to stand for, even if it costs you everything? The Spartans answered that question at Thermopylae. Now it is your turn. If this story inspired you, subscribe to learn English through history. Every week we bring you the greatest stories in history, told in simple English, so you can improve your language and your life at the same time. And tell me in the comments, what is one thing you would stand for, even if the odds were against you? Is it your family, your freedom, your dream? We want to hear your answer. Thank you for watching. Take action today, not tomorrow. See you in the next one.